United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a brief moment of silence in recognition of those and veterans who have passed. Particularly tonight, a letter of condolences go out to the family of Alan W. Mann upon his passing on 27 September 2019. Mr. Mann served in the HQ Company Field Headquarters, 7th Army, Army of Occupation, the United States Navy, Republic of Germany during the Korean War. Thank you. Just want to make a quick announcement that, just so you know, that this meeting is being aired live on our local access cable, and there are mics throughout the meeting room. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our previous meeting from October 1st.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain because I wasn't here on that vote. Announcements from the president. I have one announcement to read tonight, and that's just a reminder of a meeting that will be held here in this room on Thursday night, and that's the Bridgewater Parks and Trails, that you are invited to 2 one-hour introductions of our community's open space and conservation parklands, nearly 200 acres set aside for your recreational enjoyment. Walk, tent, fish, picnic, bicycle, canoe, and kayak. Did you know you could do that in Bridgewater? Bridgewater has 6 parklands set aside for these very activities. So please join the Bridgewater Parklands and Trails Orientation 101 on October 17th, 2019 in the Bridgewater Academy building from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. There'll also be 102, Bridgewater Parklands and Trails Orientation 102 on November 21st, the Thursday before Thanksgiving, right here in Bridgewater Academy building, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. So make your voice heard of how you would like to see these 6 parklands developed, and continue with its stewardship and efforts that are being made throughout the community. It's very, very important. This Thursday, right here, 7 o'clock. We do not have any proclamations this evening. I will open the floor to Citizens Open Forum. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the Citizens Open Forum portion of this meeting? Anybody here at all wishes to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Lee Neary, and I am a resident of Bridgewater for a year now. I live on the corner of Flag and Conant Streets, and I am concerned about the number of commercial trucks that are going down Flag Street, particularly before 7 a.m. in the morning. And recently I did a little tick sheet to see exactly how many there were, and it was a total of 25 with between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., and that was 25 going in one direction and coming back the other. My concern is the noise, because they use what I believe is called Jake brakes, and they have to slow down, and then in turn it's a 4-way stop. They have to accelerate again. I was considering buying the house that I'm living in, but it's become such a problem being a retired resident. I have a very different schedule, and it's very noisy in the morning, and it's something I thought I would bring to the attention of my selectman. So I wrote him a note, and he said that he had brought it up recently and that we might revisit that issue, and we might have an opportunity for some signage to prohibit that kind of braking. I understand that there is a complex at the far end of Flag Street, and it may be as many as 300 houses that are being built. And I understand that's where the traffic is coming from with the commercial vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' open forum portion of our meeting? Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on to item E, appointments of Robert Chris Rue from, on the Veterans Council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second to approve Robert Christian Rue on the Veterans Council. Any discussion?
Thank Mr. Rue for applying.
Absolutely. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Rue. Hearings, the hour being 7:35. Order FY 20-014, transfer order High Street Dam and Bridge preliminary work. At their meeting held 9/3/19, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. This measure is duly advertised in the enterprise on the town's website for a public hearing on 9/3. The council continued this hearing on 9/17/2019, pending disposition of the Finance Committee. On 9/17, the town council continued the hearing to 10/1, pending disposition of the Finance Committee. On 10/1, the town council further continued this measure to 10/15 at 7:35 p.m. This measure may be fully considered this evening at the conclusion of the hearing, pending a final disposition of the Finance Committee. My understanding is we still do not have a disposition from the Finance Committee, so we will continue this hearing to 11/5.
Do you need a motion?
No.
Okay.
License transactions, petition 2019023, Common Victor's License, St. Maria's Pizza, Inc., doing business as College Pizza, 750 Bedford Street. That's item
Motion to approve.
GA.
Second.
There's a motion to approve the license transaction, and there's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? License transaction has been transacted. Good luck. We do not have any presentations this evening. We'll now move on to the town manager's report. We have 3 items on there this evening. We'll start with the Mitchell School update. Mr. Dutton.
Mr. President, I have, as you mentioned, 3 items. First, Mitchell School update, which is a regular. The reminder for voters that the debt exclusion vote is coming up on Saturday, October 19th. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and the election is held in the same place it's always held. For those that don't know, it's being held at the school formerly known as the old high school, or the high school, or the Mitchell at the middle, or the middle school, so on Mount Prospect. So that polls open Saturday, October 19th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Absentee, you can still get absentee ballot applications. The deadline for those is Friday, this coming Friday at noon. So I encourage people that won't be here to get their absentee ballot. And we did realize that over the course of the last few months that there's a lot of interest, understandably so, in the history of the original Mitchell School and the building process at that time, which differs substantially from the building process today. But we did put together as many pertinent documents as we were able to find, and we have put those on the town website. Anybody interested in looking at the old plans, the old documents, the old contracts and so forth, can have at it. There are thousands of pages there. They're all in roughly chronological order, so you can certainly have at that. But that is located on our town website under the town manager's page, and you'll see Mitchell School documents listed there, so folks can go see the issues that were associated with the original construction, and get the real skinny, or at least the skinny that was available at that time. Also want to point out on our website, town website, there is a tax calculator, which gives you an estimate of additional taxes that residents would pay if the Mitchell were approved, or any of the other possible estimated debt exclusion questions were passed by voters. So folks can go on there, plug in the assessed value of their house, which is also available on the website, and you can see what the estimated amount is based upon the tax rate currently. So that's out there too. I think the council knows, but folks that don't know, the council president scheduled a special council meeting on Tuesday, October 29th, exclusively to plan for the results of the ballot vote. If a positive vote, then obviously not much to do. If a negative vote, then as I've mentioned, I'll present an appropriation order to begin the review, a review of the repairs we'd have to make to get that building usable again. Also, some people have asked about whether there are certain exemptions available for residents that may need, if the ballot vote were to pass and there were an increase in taxes, whether there are any exemptions available for those that can't afford additional taxes. My short answer is yes, there are. Those are mostly needs-based or age-based exemptions, and they range from $175 to roughly $500 off of your tax bill. So for those that feel they may qualify or may be eligible for that, I encourage you to also look at the website or talk to the assessor's office. Those exemptions are handled through the Board of Assessors, and the assessor's office can certainly answer any questions about those. But ultimately, I guess I would only stress that and for those that have experience in town meeting and don't have the opportunity to go to town meeting to vote an appropriation, that appropriation has been voted, but it's all dependent, whether that money gets spent is all dependent on the voters, and so ultimately it's the voters' choice whether or not to proceed and move forward. And so I certainly encourage people to go to the polls this Saturday, the 19th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Mr. President?
Go ahead.
I have a few questions, and I may look to my friends in the audience to help me with some information here, so be on your toes. We're meeting on the 29th, and as you said, if the vote passes, we'll just say, okay, essentially adjourn. If not, then you'll have something. There's no thought of going back to the MSBA and trying to go through a whole process again. It would just take too long. Is that the thought?
I would say that that's probably going to be the subject of the meeting on the 29th.
Okay.
If the vote fails, our line of thought is that, we need to do something. We've waited now going on 5 years or so, and so we need to act fairly quickly to do something.
I disagree with the characterization. We've waited. We've done everything the state wanted to do, and the state's made us wait, in my opinion. Thank you very much also for putting up the information on the previous building of the Mitchell School, and this is where I'm looking for my friend's help, BridgewaterSchoolProject.com. People nod their head? Yes, okay. And BridgewaterSchoolProject.com has all of the information from the building committee, and I would just implore people to look at that site, look at the site that you've put up with all the other documents. There's no reason other than, frankly, your choice to go into this vote without having as much information as you need, in my opinion. And whether you vote yay or nay, that's your prerogative, but don't go in saying, I didn't have enough information to vote, and therefore I voted yes or no or whatever. The information is out there, folks. It's the age of the internet. There's all sorts of stuff that you can learn if you choose to, and I implore you to make that choice and be an educated voter on Saturday. Thank you.
Mr. Souza?
Through you to the town manager, do we have a final cost on the building of that school?
The council has appropriated $80,600,000, and the Massachusetts School Building Authority is reimbursing $46 million? 33. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the appropriation the council made was $80,600,000, and the School Building Authority is reimbursing, if the vote passes, would be reimbursing up to a little shy of 34 million.
But the price of the finished school won't go above that 80,000, I mean 80 million, is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That's
Okay.
the limit of the
'Cause that's-
appropriation.
Why I'm asking is because that's one of the little things out there that, we have to understand, it's all great that everything is online, but we have a lot of senior citizens in Bridgewater who don't have computers, don't use them, okay? We have 14 point some percent of our population is senior citizens. So we always have to remember that.
Point well taken.
Anyone else have any questions about the Mitchell School update? Vote is Saturday. Okay, we'll move, the next item is noise impact on Flag Street. It was brought up earlier.
It was, and I know that this isn't the only intersection, the only area of town where we've got similar issues going on. Councilor Chase brought this up, rightfully so. So there are a couple things. I think, well, obviously there's a lot of building going on throughout town, and I talked to Jennifer Burke today about what realistically can we do to temper either the truck traffic or the noise. And unfortunately, there aren't too many legally enforceable ways to either divert trucks or reduce the use of Jake brakes. That is the correct term. They're engine brakes that create the noise. I know it's been said before, West Bridgewater put up signs saying, no Jake brakes use in this zone. Quite frankly, we're not broadcast in West Bridgewater, so I can say this, but those aren't enforceable. We could put the signs up. They tend, I would not recommend putting the signs up because technically they're not enforceable, and you wouldn't want to put up a sign that is not something you could enforce. We have asked some of the companies that we know of who are trucking mostly sand, gravel materials as part of site work to use alternate routes and not go through neighborhoods. I know Maple's been an issue. I know obviously Flag and Auburn have been issues. High Street's been an issue. So I do realize it's all over. We've had an impact on West Bridgewater as well. And so I know it is an issue. The challenge is, for us, is to try to figure out a solution. I think the best solution for us is amicable and to try to encourage the use of our main roadways rather than our neighborhoods. There is a process to go through with Mass DOT in order to limit the use of truck traffic on a road. Those are not freely granted, and those usually depend upon structural deficiencies in the bridges or the roadways that necessitates the limiting of truck traffic. So I'll ask Jennifer to relook at that possibility, but knowing that there's a limitation, or the limitations based on the use of that law and that regulation, I'm not terribly confident that we'd be able to get truck restrictions, enforceable truck restrictions on any of those roads. But I'm certainly open to any suggestions. If the council has any suggestions, I'm happy to
Mr. Chase? Yeah.
chase them
Thank
down.
you, Mr. President. If I may, through you to the town manager, I think that the comments earlier tonight from Ms. Neary really helped us to put in perspective the nature and the severity of the problem. It's really significant, I think, largely because the stretch of road that we're speaking about, certainly the chief's most concerned with, living on Flag Street, and as it extends into Auburn Street, that entire stretch of roadway it actually has 3 four-way stop intersections, one at Conant Street, one at Summer Street, and one finally furthest east located at Walnut Street. And it's the necessity of those stops that really exacerbates this problem. The truck traffic itself, we have to understand, as you've indicated quite properly, we're extremely limited in our ability to control the nature of traffic. But in terms of, because they need to observe those stop signs, the tendency is for multi-axled vehicles, bulk haulers, to use the Jake brake method. If you've never heard it, well, I would say this, you may not be aware of it, you've probably just been aggravated or annoyed by loud trucking noises, but it's more than just the engine sound of a truck traveling at a normal speed. It's quite a bit louder by application of that method of braking. I do think that it would be good if we could exhaust all possible avenues with respect to looking into the question of limitation of heavy truck traffic on that road. And I think it's appropriate because I think an alternative route is actually probably preferable, even from the standpoint of the truckers. I would think that to reach that part of town, it would be preferable for the truckers and certainly for the residents of Flag and Auburn Streets if Route 104, Plymouth Street, were utilized up to Walnut Street. And I suggest Walnut Street because there are no required stop signs, no required stops on Walnut Street. So there would simply be the volume of traffic, which does include truck traffic right now, heavy truck traffic. But I think that it would be a preferable alternative to the heavily populated and noise-impacted areas of Flag and Auburn Street. Barring our ability to actually route traffic along what we think to be a preferred route, the issue of signage, as you've mentioned, and we did just touch upon that very briefly some months ago. I understand now from your comments that it would not be enforceable at present, but I believe I'm correct in assuming that were the council to actually put in place an ordinance, it indeed would be enforceable. Do you have thoughts on that?
I would have to talk to specifically on the use of Jake brakes.
Right.
I don't know that it would be. I know that Jake brakes are essentially a safety device on mostly tractor trailers, also dump body trucks. But I'd have to ask the police chief and probably check with Mass DOT to see if that's something that we can enforce. I mean, I'm more than happy to look at that. And
my understanding is that for towns that do have a restriction of that nature, the ability is for quite significant fines does exist. It might be something worth considering in that regard too.
I will certainly check on that. And if there's something we can do ordinance-wise, I'm happy to present that.
Thank you.
If I can get a sponsor. I assume I'd have a sponsor.
Mr. Columbotus?
And short of that, suggestion of an ordinance, perhaps it would make sense to contact the developer of that project out on Auburn Street and ask them to suggest or strongly suggest that their subcontractors use that alternate use that Mr. Chase recommended. Of course, it's not binding, but might as well try.
Mr. Wood?
Unfortunately, that alternate method would go right through the center of town. And as we discussed last week, no one wants to go through the center of town at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So I see the problem, and it's enforced from both sides. That's what I think the issue is.
Mr. Souza?
Okay, now, the time that they're going in, isn't there a time frame in which construction or any work pertaining to construction has to start in the morning, not before? You know what that time is?
Site work, generally, if it's a planning board, if there's a planning board subdivision approval, usually the planning board stipulates, I want to say 7, but I'm not positive, but I can.
I know with construction, they're not out there with their hammers and all those other tools until 7:30, if my memory serves me right. But,
The problem there is that it doesn't restrict,
No,
the
it doesn't,
traffic.
but-
But if that were easily enforceable, you might convince the truck traffic not to arrive on site before,
it helps a little bit until something else down the road can come further.
yeah. Good point.
Okay, moving on to, do you have any other items, or is that it? Next items for
no.
next- next
Nope, I do.
items for the next meeting, does anybody want to?
I do. I was browsing our town website again, which I will reiterate is very difficult to use if you just put in search keys.
For 1 second, just for clarification, we talking the next meeting, the special meeting,
No,
or
we're
we talking
talking-
about the next regular meeting?
First November meeting, right,
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
which is November
Whatever the
2nd.
next meeting is, that there's a town
November
administrator's
5th.
report.
Okay.
For November 5th.
As I said, browsing for documents that I know are there, they're popping up older versions of the documents that are 2 or 3 years older than the final documents that we vote on, et cetera. And there's ways to fix that. But what I was looking at and found, tripped over actually, was for downtown, Mr. Dutton, I'm not looking for answers tonight, but there was a document that was signed in 2017 that I think was an application for a grant for downtown revitalization that was tied into the 2014 plan, which said parallel parking on the town common. And I'd like to hear more about what that particular activity was about, and where strategically, where the planner, what is her title?
Consultant.
No.
Development director.
Consultants, anything is doing about that, right. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to have anything else on the agenda for our November 5th meeting, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'd like an update on, I think we're going to have a discussion on Broad Street improvements coming up next, but I'd like an update on that.
And just to Mr. Souza?
I'd like to have an update on that North Street next door to the slaughterhouse, the business that's run there.
Slaughterhouse.
We discussed it here several months ago.
Again, these are items for November 5th. And if you think of anything between now and before the agenda is put together, you can still add things to the agenda after this meeting. Moving on to discussion items, Broad Street improvements. I don't know who put this on here. Mr.
did.
Wood, you did?
It was me, yeah.
Bill was
So
ready
let's
to
have a
raise-
nice lively discussion about what we drive by every single solitary day. Do we have any updates?
So let me tell you what I found out today. So I was told today that the owner of the properties that we're all talking about was in, and he was planning on filing a planning board application this coming Friday or Monday.
And how many times have we heard that?
Many.
More times than we care to
Right.
count.
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but irrelevant to this conversation. So, anything outside of that?
So, outside of that, my intent was to ask the building inspector to begin enforcement of the vacant and abandoned properties ordinance. The buildings that exist there do qualify as abandoned. There's some question as to whether the property does, the now abandoned property. It is the owner's obligation to register. There's an annual registration fee of $200 per building. And once registered, the property owner is obligated to maintain and keep in good repair any building structures, remove trash and debris, and regularly mow lawns, prune and trim trees and shrubberies, and upkeep any other landscape features. So there is an enforcement tool. I think it's time for us to exercise the enforcement tool.
How long will it take to execute on that?
We can execute on that this week.
Okay.
Man,
Mr. Souza?
you're talking about three separate parcels, the red brick building, the old ice cream shop, and then the land where the two houses were. So our problem seems to be where the buildings went down. I shouldn't say this, but fortunately, the growth is coming up pretty high, so from the street, it's kind of getting blocked off, but it's still a nuisance.
When's the last time the building inspector has inspected the buildings on that property?
Probably for their annual, the annual licensing inspection for the old Friendly's building when it had a liquor license. It's probably the last. My guess is that's the last time it was inspected. He has the ability under this ordinance to inspect the buildings, and he will.
Okay.
And in order to enforce, the registration requirements.
Yeah, I mean, we have a building on one of the parcels that has been vacant 12 years, if not longer. So not only is it a nuisance, but we also have some safety concerns that we need to address as well. And I look forward to an update on that for our next meeting.
Very good.
Had one more thing. Has he taken out a permit to tear those buildings down? We see he's got the big circle with the indication on it that they are scheduled to be taken down.
No permits have been filed
Okay.
for anything to date. So we'll see what goes on Friday or Monday.
But there is no town can't enforce anything regarding to people parking in that Friendly's parking lot, right? That's like open season for anybody. It's up to the owner to call a tow
Unfortunately.
company to have them towed out, right?
Correct.
Right.
Can I?
Go ahead.
on that? I usually go to the little barber shop right there, and he says the people who are parking in there are actually tenants. He owns the couple of multifamily homes behind the barber shop and a couple on Summer Street, and they were having some problems with parking, so he told them to go park over there. So they have been parking there since then.
So we'll keep this going, see what happens Friday. It would be nice if he does file something that maybe we can get a blanket email to the counselors that he filed something.
You'll be the first to know.
Make
I'll
our
put it on
weekend.
Twitter.
It'll make our weekend, won't it? Anyway, moving on. Any other questions on Broad Street improvements? Moving on to committee reports. Are there any committee chairs that would like to present tonight? I know Bill does. Don't say no.
I was originally going to, but there's nothing on the agenda that we spoke about tonight, so.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about the, I don't have my agenda with me. We talked about the different capital funds, stabilization funds, and the funding of free cash, so that'll be on a future agenda. We talked about, but took no action, continued the money for the Broad Street property, the other Broad Street property, which could become parkland if the sale goes through. And then, I must be missing one. We had a discussion about the resolution
Budget
also.
resolution.
Budget resolution. And we'll probably schedule a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and continue that discussion so that we can have a good, healthy discussion about what we want to do for the next fiscal year. Thanks.
Any other committees wish to give a report this evening? Moving on to item L, legislation for action, resolution FY 20-004, 2020 Town Council meeting date. This measure was not referred to any committee. 14 days has elapsed for the council rules and procedures, therefore may be fully considered this evening. You all have our handy schedule in there with an attachment of committees coming in, giving us updates, which I think is a good idea.
Motion to approve?
He can motion to approve, I'll second.
There's a motion to approve, and there's a second. Is there any discussion?
I'd just make an amendment to add the memorandum from the town manager to the meeting date so that folks know when various boards will be showing up when we
There's a
put
motion-
it on the website.
I'll second that.
There's a motion to amend the schedule to add the attached memorandum from the town manager. There's a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Now we're acting under the main motion where there's a motion, there's a second, no further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we now have our schedule for 2020, so take it out, fold it up, put it in your bag, bring it home so you don't forget.
Write it down on your calendar. Who's getting me a calendar for Christmas?
Old business. There's nothing under old business, new business. We have order FY 20030, FY 2020 classification, tax allocation, adoption of residential factor, town manager. I'd like to just, this time, this is going to be referred to the Budget and Finance Committee, but I'll direct the town clerk to begin scheduling the hearing for this for November 19th, if we could, November 19th. I'll entertain a motion to refer this to the Budget and Finance Committee.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Order FY 20031, Town River Landing Improvements. This is sponsored by myself. I wanted to put this in to kind of piggyback on the meeting that's going to be taking place on Thursday and the discussion we had at the Budget and Finance Committee earlier about the purchase of the piece of land to get into Stiles and Hart and so forth. What I'd like to see is to have the town manager move forward with the Town River Landing portion of it to seek out costs associated with the landing area itself. And I understand there's drainage issues relative to what might be under there. There's all kinds of issues that I've been told about with that landing area. So I'd like to see if this could probably be referred maybe to the Community and Economic Development Committee, maybe the Finance Committee, I'm not sure. But I'd like to get some cost estimates, and not so much just cost estimates, with perhaps a plan as to if Stiles and Hart is going to get developed in the sense of purchasing that parcel of land through a grant and opening that up and putting trails in there. It would be nice to see if it was connected. This whole thing was connected, so it would be one big area for recreation. So that's what I'm trying to do with this.
I'd make a motion to refer it to the budget, to the Community Economic Development Committee.
Second.
There's a motion, okay,
And I'd like some discussion on that.
sure. Let's say there's a motion to refer it to the Community Economic Development Committee. There is a second. Discussion, Mr. Skibbons.
I'm in no way against the idea, but I think it needs to be fleshed out a little bit, because we say including but not limited to walkways and trails, but what's the other not limited? It's kind of an open-ended thing, and do we want to talk about a budget number or not? That, because when I say to my wife, you can spend it on this and not limited to that, you'll go on forever.
No, that's
You know, so I'd just like to hear the Community Economic Development Committee's ideas on what needs to happen to, kind of actuate your vision for what you're
absolutely.
looking at.
And I think there are other stakeholders in the community that may have different ideas as to what might be best fit that area. Maybe it shouldn't be connected to Stiles and Hart. I don't know. Maybe we ought to get all our dancing partners together, and this is the beginning of it, to put it before the Community Economic Development, get everybody together and say, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to develop it? We want the weeds to continue to grow. What are the problems underneath the weeds? Do we need to dig it up and make sure that, I understand there might be some drainage or some sort of environmental issue, which always comes up. So let's
I'm
let's dive into
just
it,
looking at it as the Community Economic Development Committee has an opportunity to amend this substantially to say, here's the stuff we want to deal with, if the chairman's okay with that. I mean, seems right in your bailiwick.
Yep.
right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I'm wary of this sort of piecemeal approach. I don't know how many acres that site is, but all right, the revitalization plan we commissioned in 2014 cited that lot as an area for redevelopment, and that what came out of that plan was commercial along the street, residential behind, and then recreational use, canoe launch or trails off that back of that. So I think we should start with that. So I would just urge, I would push within our committee for a kind of a higher higher altitude view of the whole project and to look at it comprehensively and how the parts are going to work together, so.
And keep in mind that Styles and Hart is moving forward too at the same time, and plus whatever comes out of Thursday night's meeting,
Right.
I'm sure we're going to get perhaps more proposals or more ideas, and so forth. So this is a good opportunity let's talk about it. Hopefully we'll see results. I'd like to see some results. That's my big term.
Yeah.
Okay, so any more discussion on this? It's referring it to Community and Economic Development. There's a motion, there's a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Off it goes. Hopefully we'll see it soon. Thank you. FY 20032, declaring the highway barn surplus property. Again, I'm proposing this. This kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. The white highway barn at adjacent Spring Street has been sitting there vacant for several years. I understand it's been cleaned out. It's empty. I know the town manager was working on making sure there's not a lot of contamination there. I believe that's been resolved, sort of. I'd like to see the thing torn down, but we have to declare it surplus property to do something with. This is step one. Am I correct?
Correct.
If we're going to do anything, we need to declare it surplus property.
Correct.
From that point on, we can decide to tear it down, which I hope we do, and build some parking there, or we can sell it, if that's what we want to do. So this would be referred, I think the best committee for this to go to would be Community and Economic Development as well, in my opinion.
I'd make that motion.
I'd second it.
There's a motion and a second to refer this to the Community and Economic Development.
I'd defer to Mr. Columbotus.
I would just like to make one point of clarification. Presumably, we could knock it down without declaring it surplus, right?
Correct.
Right. So that's not required for that. And again, I'll urge our committee to take a bird's eye view of best uses for the site.
It ties together with the previous one.
Yeah. I'd like to take exception with I will push for an amendment to strike the clause that says pave the cleared area for parking. As I said, the revitalization plan and best practices in municipal planning discourages parking right on the sidewalk, and that creates, if we're aiming for a pedestrian-friendly downtown, the best use for that land right on the sidewalk is for some sort of commercial retail activity, and that increases interest for pedestrians and adds to the commercial tax base. There's probably plenty of parking on Spring Street, and so I will be pushing for that amendment.
Well, we'll talk about it when it comes back, but there's a motion and there's a second. Any discussion? Mr. Wood?
Just last piece. When it does move to economic development, I hope from a bird's eye view, you also consider Spring Street as possibly the second economic downtown. There's a lot of opportunity there for storefronts and other mixed use in that area that's not on the main boulevard, So not only just the corner, but the whole street under consideration adjacent to this.
Yeah, it's uniquely situated between the university, the Roach Brothers Plaza, and the train station. It's really a ripe area, really ripe for redevelopment.
Right.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We'll see that soon. Citizens' comments. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? Anybody at all? Step right up, Mr. Hunt.
Carl Hunt, 80 Austin Street. Regarding the Flag Street truck issue, do we know that those trucks are actually going to the developments there? Or are they using that road as a way to get over to East Street, to get to 104, to get them to the landfill that's taking a lot of dirt right now in order to build up that property for a solar field? I don't know if those trucks all belong to those site work. And it could be a bypass that they're using.
Anybody else wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? He's got a binder with him.
Mike Dolan, 20 Sherrill Drive, also Vice Chair of the School Building Committee. So I have a prepared written statement, but I wanted to address a couple of things that were brought up tonight. Specifically, this Thursday, sorry, Mr. Gallagher, but there's another meeting in town. We have a final presentation this Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the high school lecture hall. That'll be from 7 to 9. It is our last of probably 12 or 13 public presentations. The tax calculator that Mr. Dutton mentioned does give the tax rate for the first year of the bond only, to be clear, to clarify that, if I could. So that average value that you see is for your first year. After the bond continues to lessen, your payment over time will decrease. So just want to, and then Mr. Souza, you had mentioned that many of our seniors don't have internet access, and we plan for that. And back on September 5th, we put 3 binders throughout town, one at the reference desk at the library, one at the senior center, and one downstairs in this building at the town clerk's office. But for my prepared statement, before I read that, actually, this is a portion of all of the information and all of the work that we've compiled over the past year and a half. There are reports after report that I did not print because I care about trees. But those can be found on our website, as Mr. Fitzgibbons alluded to. I encourage everyone to go there, as we have been telling people for months now. But again, just so people see that this wasn't a fly-by-night operation, that we actually spent a year and a half of long, hard work going through this paperwork, going through these documents, going through other options. We've been there. But as for my prepared statement, as you know, I've been attending these meetings for several years now, and I don't typically speak. I hope you appreciate the fact that I'm speaking to you tonight passionately. I find it a little disheartening when I sat through these meetings and we listened to many of you mention that there are committees in town that don't have volunteers, or committees can't meet because they don't have quorum. I find it surprising that when you have a committee, the school building committee, that has done everything appropriately, has met for over a year and a half, has met the charge that we were given head on. I find it disheartening that members of this body at the 11th hour are questioning what we've done, and on Facebook. The fact that they've attended 3 or 4 meetings, and then again at the 11th hour have come in and are undermining the work we've done as volunteers. It's frankly a wonder that you're all surprised that there isn't a line of folks at the front door of this building looking to volunteer their time and efforts when, frankly, it's undermined. I think it would behoove everyone to stay off of Facebook and attend those meetings just as we attend all other meetings. We don't just come to the school building committee meetings. We're at these meetings. We're at the budget meetings when we can be, when we don't have other meetings. So please, I implore all of you to educate yourselves on this project. Speak eloquently about it. You may not agree with it, and that's fine. I have no problem with people not agreeing with it. But stop spreading misinformation or partial information. It's hurting our town, it's dividing our community, and we cannot allow that to happen. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting?
Good evening. My name is Mark Ferreira of 274 Oak Street. Some of you know me from some of the spirited discussions taking place on social media over the vote this coming Saturday. I'm not ashamed to declare my support for the debt exclusion to fund our new elementary school. As a parent, a volunteer, a citizen of Bridgewater, a nonprofit administrator, and a man of the cloth, I believe it is my obligation to speak out on behalf of our children. It's unfortunate that after so much time, effort, and expenditure, some members of council not only refuse to lend their support to our school district, but even choose to act against its best interests. When a town councilman spreads partial, incomplete, and misleading information, I will speak out. When a town councilman chooses not to condemn vandalism of campaign materials, I will speak out. When a town councilman publicly attacks religious nonprofits as consuming resources without contributing, I will speak out. I stand here to advocate for our children who do not have the right to do so. They will be the most impacted, and they cannot vote. That leaves us with the duty to work on their behalf for the betterment of our community and the world that they must live in, a world which is worsened when we ignore global issues like climate change, and a world that is broken when we refuse to invest in their education here in our own community. I consider the needs of our children, and I can't help but remember the words found in the Gospel of Matthew when encouraging people to help each other. Words that challenge us and charge us with the care of well-being of those in our society who need our help. The teacher said, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." In light of these ancient words of wisdom and in view of compassion, justice, and our shared responsibility, I call on all of Town Council to support the new Mitchell School. Vote yes on Saturday and encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
Is there anybody else here that wishes to speak during the citizens' comments portion of our meeting? Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll move on to council comments. I'll begin with on my far right, Mr. Souza.
No comment this evening.
Mr. Chase.
I would just briefly like to echo your comments concerning the meeting to take place here on Thursday evening. I plan to attend. I wish to better acquaint myself with the parkland resources of the town, and I would encourage everyone in town to do that as well.
Councilor Wood.
Thank you. Last week I spent time in Washington, D.C. It's a great city. I grew up there nearby, and when you go into the Capitol building and you learn about the leaders of our country, both past and present, you're reminded that government isn't an easy thing, and that there's often discussion throughout all topics. It also reminded me that when my kids were in the school system, that they were not allowed to travel out of state. They were not allowed to go to Washington, D.C. or other locations for school trips because of school policy. And the policy was that we were at war and you couldn't travel out of state. I hope that in the future, for the sake of our children, that these policies are relaxed and that trips to Washington, D.C. and other historical and educational places are allowed in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. George.
Thank you, President Gallagher. I think, obviously, I think for people that have been paying attention the last year or so, we've got a very, very big decision to make on Saturday. The social media aspect of anything these days is much more of a burdensome and much more negative than it has for any positive aspect, in my personal opinion. I've always said at the very beginning in any election, if whatever's decided is done on an educated basis, we have to live with the results. An educated basis, not something that you've read on a social media page that you have no idea if it's true or not. I haven't gone to all the meetings, I'll freely admit that, but I do appreciate the fact that I can, in a fairly short period of time, get the information that I need if I'm not familiar with something in regards to the project. And that does not mean that it's going to change a person from a no to a yes, or a yes to a no, but it's going to give them the facts to consider and weigh upon what they're going to do. From my perspective, I support the project for the mere fact that not only is it going to address the needs of the community today, but it's going to address our needs in the future, and a multitude of reasons. And I think what happens a lot is people look at it very myopically around one particular aspect, but that can become somewhat of a quasi-community center with some of the additional things that are going to be in there, and that's actually a plus, and again, in my personal opinion. But I'll leave it with this. We need to reinvest in civility so that, as was pointed out, if people want to get involved in any way, shape, or form, they're not looking at getting involved as a blood sport. And that's what this has come down to. It is now a blood sport. And for people that are qualified, who want to get involved, they're not going to put up with that, and I don't blame them. So what I'll leave you with is this for Saturday. This time, we've got resources, physical resources for people that don't have access to the internet, which I totally appreciate. We have people that have it. Take the time over the next couple days, sit down, go through the presentations, go through the material as best you can, and then go to the polls with an educated vote. And on that note, I hope to see a very large contingent of people voting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rush?
Thank you. And obviously tonight I wanted to, talk about the school and the upcoming vote. What I wanted to start off by saying tonight was to just publicly acknowledge the work of the building committee. The committee has come forward with a proposal and is exactly, to Mr. Dolan's point, exactly what we asked them to do. I'm not going to second guess the information. All of the information is there, and I see the things in social media, and if you've looked at my profile, I have a profile for my counselor position, and I refused to participate in the discussions online because none of the information is as valid as the information that's been provided by the building committee that's on their website. That's where everybody should be going if you have not attended meetings. Bridgewater Bagel, I believe this morning and tomorrow, 9 to 11, I have an open discussions with anybody that can participate. This is where you should be getting your information. I can only hope two things: that people show up to vote on Saturday in large numbers, that are making educated votes. I will tell you that my vote is a yes because it's in the best interest of our community and our children. The children of our community, the foundation of our community. If we can't start off right by building a strong foundation, I don't know where we're going to be in 20 years. So with that said, I would just like to publicly thank the school building committee for all of the time, effort, and energy. And to Mr. Dolan's point, I agree with you. You've been at every meeting. Sometimes I sit here and wonder why you're in this meeting. And, the enormous sacrifice that you and others on the committee have shown towards this project, I have a lot of respect for that. So I thank you for your service on the committee as well as everyone else. I just wanted to tail off on that and remind everybody, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Bridgewater Police Department is selling uniform patches, pink patch in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month and raising funds, as well as the fire department. Both of them are selling them at the fire department and at the police department. I encourage people to swing in, say hello, and pick up a patch. All of the proceeds go towards breast cancer awareness research. I also wanted to publicly thank firefighter Richard Smith, who retired. The Bridgewater Fire Department had a retirement party for him on Saturday. He retired after 15 years of service, and I just want to thank him for his service to the community and to the town of Bridgewater. And lastly, just thank the fire department, who last Saturday had an open house at Station 2. Very well attended. It was a great opportunity, a lot of children there. They did some demonstrations with some of the equipment, and if you go through the fire station, you'd really get a real appreciation for, one, I think they've just posted recently, the amount of calls that the fire department goes in our community, the amount of work, the things that they see. And it was just a nice opportunity to go in and thank the firefighters that were there, which, by the way, most of them were volunteering their time to put on these demonstrations for the children. So I just wanted to, publicly thank the fire department as well. Thank you.
Mr. Columbotus?
Thank you, Mr. President. I too would like to thank the work of the Bridgewater Building Committee. There's several professionals on that committee who know what they're talking about. They know big construction projects. So it's been well vetted. I mean, so I'd like to, thank them for that work. I also want to point out that while I appreciate the sort of moral arguments for building a good school and providing good education, I think for those of us who might be a little more self-interested, a good quality school building is really and a good school system is really a major factor in where high-value firms decide to locate. So if we're trying to draw business to town, we want to draw, high-tech businesses that provide good jobs, pay good taxes, don't create a whole lot of negative effects. If we want to draw those sorts of people and educated workers, we really need a good school system. Property taxes are not a big factor in where firms decide to locate. I don't know, 10, 11 years ago when we first started this council and we decided there was a proposal to create an economic development committee. And I suggested that we instead call that committee the Community and Economic Development Committee. And that my reasoning was that economic development depends on a strong community and developing all the community resources, education, parklands, open space, quality of life. We could make a race to the bottom and lower taxes, lower barriers to private investment. But the problem is any town could do that. Any town could bid lower than we do. What we have in Bridgewater, we have a lot of tremendous assets. We've got a university, a commuter rail, access to highways, nice neighborhoods, parklands. And I think our best way to achieve really positive development in town is to develop those assets. And one of those, most important assets is a school. So for that reason, if nothing else, I don't have kids in the school. I probably won't have grandchildren in this school. But if only for narrow self-interest, I would support the construction of the new school. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Everyone's said so much about the school here. I'd just echo, be an informed voter, please. I already said that earlier. And make the best decision. But to pick up on a point Mr. George made about bringing back some civility or whatever Mr. George said in his final comments, I would like to say that every person I've ever served with here on the council, every person I ever served with on the Board of Assessors, on the school committee, on the town finance committee, any board I've ever served on the school building committee, most recently with the schools, I've always felt like we might disagree about some things, but you're coming at it and I'm coming at it from this is what we think is in the best interest of the town. And we let folks decide. And to Mr. George's point, as long as everyone makes an educated decision, you live with the result of that vote. So I want to thank you all for serving with me. I want to thank the school building committee and the school committee, because most of them are here, and the finance committee. For being here, and for what they do, because I know they're working for the best interest of the town too. And if we can just step back sometimes and keep that in mind, it can certainly become a lot less personal and heated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbons. Finally, I'll be brief tonight to not reiterate what has been said about Saturday, but Saturday is very, very important to the citizens and to the voters of this community. And we've been down this road before. And there may be other projects coming down the road as well. But it's a project that is well overdue. It's been needed for several years. We can all talk about and rehash how it got here or how did it get to this point. And we've had those discussions. And I think that there are many more, a lot more, laws in place and policies in place and so forth that will prevent what happened before to happen again. And we have now going on about 4 or 5 years that building, those buildings have been sitting vacant. And a committee was formed, and they deserve a lot of credit for the work that they have done. And if passed on Saturday, there's more work to be done. It's not easy thing to do to sit and come to these meetings day in, day out, and miss some opportunities with your family. But it's a community effort, and I've talked about that so many times since I've been a counselor. It's a community problem. It's a community event. It's a community thing. And what kind of community do we want? And I remember back in 1999, when I was only in this town for about 4 years, I stood with the police and the fire and the highway personnel to support a debt exclusion to build a sub-fire station, a new police station, and a highway barn. And I was happy to do that. We saw the need then, and it passed back in September of 1999, over 20 years ago. We've had subsequent votes and debt exclusions to better our community for what it needs. This project, a school or elementary school for our children and our future children, is needed. And I see that. I will be supporting this on Saturday, and I hope that the citizens of Bridgewater step up to the plate and at least voice your concern, voice your opinion, get out and vote, because that's what it's all about. We can be keyboard warriors and have these uncivil discussions on social media, but you're right. I'm very proud of the colleagues that I serve with on the board, that we have, for the most part, kept the discussion about this project very civil on the board, and we've listened to presentations day in and day out. And the committee that made their recommendation about 3 or 4 months ago was almost unanimous, with a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion that night when that vote went forward, and I sat in the audience and listened. But I hope that the outcome is favorable and that we can move on in this community for what is best for our citizens and for our taxpayers today and in the future. That being said, we do not have an executive session this evening. Just remember, we have a special meeting 2 weeks from tonight. I finally got 3 council meetings in 1 month. That was my goal. I got it.
Motion to adjourn?
Entertain a motion to adjourn. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?